My name is Madison Carter. I am 35 years old, a public school art teacher. And for the past 7 years, I've been married to Daniel, an environmental engineer, with a heart bigger than his paycheck. We live in a modest home, just outside Charleston, surrounded by tall oaks and a stubborn rose bush that refuses to bloom. Our life is simple, but it's ours. Daniel comes from old Southern money. His family, the Carters, own property downtown, still talk about debutante 8 balls, and name-drop Ivy League schools like their casual weekend plans. From the first time I met them, I felt like I had wandered into the wrong room, like everyone else had the script, and I was left ad-libbing my way through. None of them ever said anything overtly cruel, but there's a certain kind of silence, a polite smile, a carefully chosen compliment that cuts deeper than words. And no one wielded those silent weapons better than Daniel's younger sister, Aubrey. Aubrey Carter was the princess of the family and events planner by profession, with an Instagram aesthetic so curated it felt like stepping into a filtered fairy tale. When she got engaged to Harrison Wells, heir to a regional banking fortune, it became the only thing the Carter family talked about for 8 straight months. I knew the wedding would be grand. I knew it would be intense, but I didn't know it would be humiliating. At the rehearsal dinner the night before her wedding, I discovered something that made my stomach turn. My name, written in elegant calligraphy on a cream-colored place card, was placed at the far end of the long banquet table, right next to the venue staff and wedding planner. Daniel was seated up front with the family. I was listed in what they later called the staff section. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about a seating arrangement. It was a message, one I could no longer pretend not to hear. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a coupon flyer and a utility bill. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with gold foil lettering and a custom wax seal stamped with the initials A and H. I didn't need to read the return address. It had Aubrey written all over it, figuratively and literally. Inside was a suite of cards that looked like they belonged in a museum. Watercolor illustrations of the venue, pressed floral accents, and an entire pamphlet detailing accommodations, dress codes, shuttle schedules, and of course a color palette guide. Black tie only. Guests were kindly requested to wear navy, silver, or black to match the wedding's sophisticated aesthetic. Daniel glanced over my shoulder and gave a short laugh. Heaven forbid someone shows up in burgundy and ruins the Instagram grid. I smiled, but my stomach clenched. I'd been to Carter family events before, and I always felt like an outsider trying too hard. I still remember the Christmas where I brought homemade cookies, only to watch them sit untouched next to imported macarons. Or the Easter brunch where I was seated between 2 aunts who spent the entire meal asking what I really did for a living. This time I wanted things to be different. I wanted to blend in, maybe even be accepted. So I dipped into our vacation fund and bought a navy blue gown with delicate beading that shimmered just enough to catch the light, but not enough to offend Aubrey's sense of restraint. I booked an appointment for an updo, something I never splurged on. I even practiced walking in heels I had no business wearing for more than 10 minutes at a time. Daniel noticed. "You don't have to prove anything to them, Maddie. They're the ones who don't get it." I appreciated his words, but I didn't tell him how deep that longing ran, the desire to just be seen as enough. Not pitied, not tolerated, just seen. I knew how much Daniel had given up for me. He turned down a position in his father's investment firm to pursue environmental work. She chose passion over prestige, and while he never said it out loud, I knew that choice was still a quiet disappointment to his parents. I didn't want to be another reason they looked at him with veiled disapproval. So I checked attending with pleasure on the RSVP card, sealed the envelope, and slid it into the outgoing mail slot. A small act of hope, or maybe denial. Either way, the countdown had begun. The Wednesday before the wedding, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Aubrey. I stared at the screen for a second, surprised. She never called me directly. Texts, sure. Group messages, yes, but a phone call? I answered, cautiously optimistic. Maybe this was her extending an olive branch. "Madison, thank goodness I caught you," she said, her voice syrupy with urgency. "I wanted to talk to you about the rehearsal dinner." "Of course," I said, standing a little straighter as if she could see me through the phone. "I have a small favor to ask," she continued. "You have such an artistic eye, and honestly, I don't trust the wedding planner to get the little details right. So would you mind coming to the venue early on Friday to help with the place cards and table arrangements?" Her words were flattering on the surface, but something in her tone made me hesitate. Still, this was the first time she had ever acknowledged that I had any kind of skill or value outside of being Daniel's wife. I wanted so badly to believe this was a step forward. "I'd be happy to help," I said, brushing aside the quiet discomfort settling in my chest. "Wonderful," she said. "Be there by 11. The planner will have everything ready for you. And Madison, thank you. It means a lot to have family who can just pitch in when needed. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, trying to figure out whether I'd just been complimented or handed a uniform. That evening I told Daniel about the call. He frowned, folding his arms as he leaned against the kitchen counter. Did she ask any of her bridesmaids to help? I don't think so, I admitted. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, gently, just make sure you're not being taken advantage of. You're a guest at this wedding, not the help. I nodded, but I wanted to believe this was progress. That maybe, after all these years, I was finally being brought into the fold. I packed my dress, heels, makeup, and accessories the night before, careful to include a separate outfit for Friday morning, something nice but practical. I went to bed hopeful, determined to give Aubrey the benefit of the doubt. Friday morning arrived with sunshine and birdsong. I kissed Daniel goodbye, promising to text when I got there. He squeezed my hand before I left. Call me if anything feels off, okay? I promised. Driving through the historic district of Charleston, I passed rows of magnolia trees and antebellum homes. The Bellwood estate came into view, 12 acres of manicured perfection, a mansion straight out of a movie. I took a deep breath and turned into the iron gates. It felt like stepping into another world, one that would soon show me just how unwelcome I really was. Bellwood estate was everything the brochures promised and more. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings. Antique mirrors reflected golden light, and the scent of fresh lilies floated through the air. Staff in black uniforms moved briskly, arranging glassware and floral centerpieces with practiced precision. A woman with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset approached me as soon as I stepped inside. You must be Madison, she said without looking up. I'm Elise, the coordinator? Rebecca said you'd be handling the place cards personally. The word handling hung in the air. I nodded and followed her to the east parlor, where boxes of wedding materials were already stacked. Place cards, menus, table numbers, ceremony programs all waiting to be sorted, alphabetized, arranged. Another woman named Meredith was already unpacking items. She greeted me warmly, mistaking my stunned silence for awe. First time at Bellwood. First time at any place like this, I replied truthfully. $14 million, she whispered, glancing around. This is one of the most expensive weddings we've done this year. The flowers alone cost more than my car. I tried to smile, but inside, I was wondering why someone spending that kind of money needed me an unpaid family guest to arrange stationery. Still, I said nothing. For the next 3 hours I worked without pause. I laid out the calligraphy cards in alphabetical order. I filled welcome bags with Charleston-themed treats. I tied ribbons around the ceremony programs with trembling fingers. No one offered me lunch. No one asked if I needed water. When Elise returned, she wasn't alone. Aubrey's mother, Miss Eleanor Carter, walked in, wearing a pale blue dress and an expression of polite scrutiny. Oh, she said with mild surprise, Rebecca was right about your attention to detail. It's so useful to have someone with your background for these little crafts. I forced a smile and resisted the urge to mention my master's degree in fine arts. Apparently, arranging pre-printed cards now counted as crafts. Just as I was about to gather my things, Eleanor gestured toward a side table. Before you go, could you check the guest book setup? Rebecca had specific thoughts, and you've been so helpful. I looked at my watch. It was nearly 3 p.m. I hadn't eaten. I still had to drive to the hotel, change, and meet Daniel in time for the rehearsal. I can take a quick look, I said, my voice dry. One more task turned into 20 more minutes. By the time I reached the hotel, Daniel was already in the room, pacing. He looked up as I entered, out of breath and still in my work clothes. Where have you been? I've been calling you. I was helping, I said, peeling off my shoes. They had me arranging bouquets, then the guest book table. I haven't even had lunch. His face darkened. This is exactly what I was afraid of. They're treating you like staff. It's fine, I said, trying to wave it off. It's just one day. No, Madison, it's not fine. You're family. You're my wife. And they've turned you into their assistant. I looked at him in the mirror as I applied my makeup. His reflection was tight-lipped, angry but also worried. I just want to get through this weekend, I said softly. For you. For me? He repeated. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your dignity for me. That's not love. But I already knew, and I already felt a shift inside me. A quiet breaking point. We arrived at the rehearsal right on time. The garden was stunning, but I couldn't stop wondering where they'd seat me next. The rehearsal moved quickly. Everyone knew their roles, and Elise ran the show with military precision. As family not part of the bridal party, Daniel and I were seated in the second row during the ceremony run-through. It was fine. Expected, even. but something about the way Aubrey avoided looking at me stirred an unease I couldn't quite name. Afterward, we were ushered into Bellwood's formal dining room for the rehearsal dinner. The room was breathtaking hand-painted wallpaper, towering floral arrangements, flickering candlelight. Every detail screamed prestige. Daniel and I approached the long dining table, scanning for our names. He found his quickly seated next to his parents and directly across from Aubrey and her fiancé. My card. It was at the opposite end, next to the venue coordinator and the lighting technician. The staff section. My face flushed, not just with embarrassment but with something deeper, disbelief maybe? Or grief. Because for the first time it was undeniable. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. Daniel clenched his jaw. This can't be right. He walked straight to Aubrey, who was smiling and greeting guests at the entrance. I watched from a distance as her expression remained composed, but her eyes grew sharper, colder. When he returned, his voice was tight. She says it was an oversight, that rearranging things now would be too disruptive. What do you want to do? I asked, trying to steady my voice as people began to sit. I'm sitting with you, he said firmly. If that means we're at the end of the table, so be it. I touched his arm. Don't make a scene, please. Let's just get through the night. We'll talk about it later. He hesitated, then nodded, though it clearly pained him. Dinner was 5 courses of exquisite food I could hardly taste. I made polite conversation with Elise and the coordinator, both of whom seemed to sense the awkwardness. From where I sat, I could see Daniel rigid, disengaged from the conversation around him, his eyes flicking toward me more than once. After dinner, as guests began to mingle, Aubrey finally approached me. Everything looked amazing today, she said, her voice sugar-sweet. Thank you so much for your help. I met her gaze. The seating arrangement was inappropriate, Aubrey. You know that. She blinked. Oh, I thought you'd be more comfortable down there since you'd been working with Elise all day. Her smile never faded, but mine did. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in golden light and soft music drifting from the garden. Bellwood looked like a dream, rows of white chairs facing a floral archway, soft linen ribbons fluttering in the breeze. I stood near the edge of the lawn, watching guests arrive in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. I had dressed with care, my navy gown flowing to the ground, my hair pinned in soft curls. I looked the part, but I didn't feel like I belonged. Daniel found me by the fountain. Ready? He asked gently. I nodded, but my hands were clenched. We were escorted to our seats again, the second row, again the polite distance. And yet, I noticed something else. Guests glancing at me with confusion, some with pity. They had seen me the day before, working, carrying boxes, adjusting ribbon, smiling through it all. They didn't see a sister-in-law. They saw staff. I sat through the ceremony like a statue. Aubrey floated down the aisle, radiant in lace and diamonds, the crowd gasping as if this were a royal affair. She didn't look at me once. But I watched her, not with envy, not with admiration, with admi. She had never seen me as family. And I finally realized I didn't need her to. When the vows ended and applause rose, I stood, quietly, calmly. I walked back down the aisle before the recessional music started, stepping onto the path that led away from the lawn. Daniel followed seconds later. Madison, what are you doing? He asked, out of breath. I'm done, I said softly. I can't smile through being erased anymore. He looked at me, searching. I don't need their seat at the table, I added. I'll build my own. He didn't argue. He took my hand. And together we left. No dramatic exits, no harsh words, just silence and the echo of something shifting. Behind us, the photographer snapped family portraits without us. The kind that would hang in Eleanor Carter's home for years. But something someone would be missing. And that would speak louder than any seat at any table ever could. So it's been almost a year since that wedding. Daniel and I moved 2 months after the ceremony. We found a small house near the mountains, quiet, surrounded by trees, with a porch that catches the morning sun just right. I planted new roses in the backyard. This time they bloom. The Carters don't call much anymore. At first, there were a few awkward messages. You left so suddenly. It really hurt Aubrey's feelings. But eventually the silence grew, and in that silence I found peace. Sometimes walking through the house in the early mornings, I think about how much I used to try, how hard I worked to be accepted, how many tiny pieces of myself I shaved away, hoping someone might finally see me as worthy. But here's the truth, trying to fit into someone else's version of belonging is a slow kind of erasure. And sometimes, walking away is the most honest thing you can do. Daniel often tells people that leaving that wedding wasn't a statement, it was a quiet boundary. A line we both needed to draw, not out of anger but out of love, for ourselves, for each other, for the life we wanted to build that had nothing to do with family trees or curated aesthetics. I tell this story not because I want sympathy or even outrage. I tell it because I know someone watching this has been there, in that room, at that table, wearing the perfect dress, smiling through invisible bruises. To you I say this: you are not invisible. You are not a placeholder in someone else's picture-perfect world. And you never have to shrink to fit someone else's frame. So if you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong, remember, you get to decide where you sit. Or if you sit at all. If this story touched you, please like, share, or leave a comment. Your story matters. Your voice matters, and you are not alone. We see you.